for coming. I know that due to the circumstances, it was a little bit hard for many of you guys, but welcome. My name is Olga, and that is Katie, my co-chair with the Latino committee with LCLA. Today we're going to be talking about feminism, and a lot of the topics that we are going to be covering, we do want to debrief you guys all. So some of the topics we will be discussing is the 4 waves of feminism. The first wave began in the early 19th century with just improving gender equality within women.
And the second wave began around the 60s and 70s. It was really building off of the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War protests. And it was more so focusing on institutions that held women back more rather than the individuals. And so there were some really big major wins there. There was the Equal Pay Act in 1963 and the Roe v. Wade, which fortunately was real. And there were 3 main types of feminism that emerged: mainstream/liberal. It focused on institutional reforms, like I said earlier, and reducing gender discrimination. And there was radical feminism. It wanted to reshape society entirely. And cultural feminism, which kind of built on radical feminism, and it believed that there was a female essence that was very distinctly different from men.
Then we jumped into the third wave of feminism, which really focuses on reclaiming one's sexuality and breaking away from that traditional norm of what women should be acting like or dressing. And where we are now, which is that 4th wave of feminism.
Where it's also building on third wave feminism, which of course the waves are going to build on each other. What separated the 4th wave was the Me Too movement and this resurgence of attacks on women's rights, unfortunately. And also the social media activism. Through that, feminism really took its place and ground in the technological era. And so that's where we are today. Oh, and focusing on including transgender rights, genderqueer, really wanting to include everybody.
Today we celebrate and honor all the incredible women that contributed to the resilience that we've had across many different generations, as you guys are going to see in our panel. As we're going to go ahead and introduce Susan.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Castellanos. I am a professora at Mount St. Mary's University, as well as Cal State University of Indian Hills. I am also a PhD candidate, so I'll be graduating the first in my family in May. And I'm just really grateful to be here because I get to now share my journey and my story with others, which has been a hard journey. I'm always transparent, but it's been a very rewarding journey at the same time. So I'm just happy to be here. And what else can I say? Yes, PhD candidate. I'm from South LA, South Central, if anyone's familiar. Born and raised. Very proud of it as well. I spent some time in New York as well, in the Bronx, New York for a few years. And I made my way back home, and I'm getting to teach and doing what I love. I'm in the Department of Social Work, specifically getting my PhD in social work. So I love these topics. They are very dear to me, and I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Anali, and I guess I'm the godmama here. I was born here, but I was raised in El Salvador, and I came back when I was already a young adult, and I've done many things. And currently, I just graduated with my yoga certification, and I am working on becoming a doula and a postpartum Ayurveda caregiver as well. That is very to my heart, and I feel that we need to bring that back, what postpartum means and how a woman should be taking care of themselves, or just anybody once they deliver a baby, because it's really important for the body. So that's where I am now. I am a child development. I've been working with kids for very, very, very long time, and they are very dear to my heart. Currently, I am working as an ABA recruiter and trying to get VIs to work with our babies that have autism or under the spectrum. Very difficult. So if you know anybody, please send them my way. And that's where I am now. So I've done many things that surround around being a service to others, being a service to the little young ones, and now hopefully going into that field to take care of women and their bodies, so they have babies, and that's where I am now. I am a mama, very proud. I have birthed 6 babies, and yeah, that's what I got for now.
just as you, I also grew up in South Central, and I am very, very proud of it. I am an advocate for reproductive rights and environmental justice, particularly in Watts. I grew up in the Watts community. I graduated from high school in the Watts community, in a high school predominantly populated by people of color, and to this day, there's ongoing environmental injustices in my community. So I am very proud to be able to be here, and I want to share a little bit about why I actually went to USC, because I think it's very important. And I was contemplating on moving to Berkeley and attend UC Berkeley. They were offering me a very, very good scholarship, and I decided to particularly stay here in South Central so I can represent my community everywhere that I go, and I can continue advocating for my community and the people that raised me, and just to ensure that all the work that I do is for the people that raised me, for my upbringings, and so I just will never be able to forget that. So yeah, thank you, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Ingrid, thank you for thinking of me and remembering me, and yeah, I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Before we begin, I do want to thank Midnight Books for allowing us this space to go ahead and have this panel. For starters, I'm going to go ahead and just ask a question for all. Do you consider yourself a feminist? And if so, why or why not? Whoever wants to start.
So yes, I do consider myself a feminist. I definitely would identify more with the Chicana feminist slash Latina feminist. I know the terms have been evolving, but I am a prior sociology and Chicano studies major, so I learned a lot about Chicana feminism, specifically through writers like Chedi Moraga, Gloria Zandula. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of these authors before, so that's a little bit of my background. I also focus my research on like Latino first-gen students, and I look at gender ideologies like marinismo, machismo, so I just want to give that context to like how I'm answering the questions are going to always be from that perspective, like a very Latinx, Latina, however you identify, perspective. So yes, it is a Chicana feminista, because we know that feminism is very intersectional, meaning that your experience with feminism can be very different depending on how much you make, depending on your race, depending on, you know, it's bigger than just sexism. It explores like racism as well. So, and obviously experiences that are common for Latinas. So I identify mainly and strongly with Chicana feminism for sure.
So for me, this question has been pondering on my head ever since I read it, because growing up in El Salvador, and at my age, you know, I was still young, the information was vague, but the interpretation of being a feminist at that time, it was wanting to be like a man. So it's like, you want to be like a man. And at that moment, because I'm a very proud woman and I embrace it with everything that I got, I feel like, why the heck do I want to be a man? You know, like, I want to be like that. Like, screw them. So for me, at that time, it would have been a straight no. Like, I'm not a feminist. But because the question was like pondering, I was like, all right, let me see what it means now, how it has changed. So now, seeing that it's more about equity rather than equality, I am a feminist, because I do believe that we all deserve not equality, because if you're already tall and there's a fence, and then you're just gonna give me a stool to get over it, like shit, I'm still not gonna see nothing, right? You need to make it like more than just fair. You need to give me 2 stools, maybe so I could level up with whoever the hell is next to me. So yes, so equity, now feminist, yes.
Yeah, so I definitely would say I'm a feminist. I think in my generation, feminism was not really like a question. It was implemented into our lives since the beginning. And I think I was raised by a single mother, so I feel like just growing up in a single mother household, she really made it like shown that it's possible. There's, you know, as a woman, you don't, because for me, feminism was always like, I don't need a man. That's always how at first it was like introduced in my life. I don't need a man, but I think now that ideology is shifting. Like you can be a feminist still with a man or with whoever, but I think growing up and just seeing my mother really figure out a way without having a male present, she really made, I think she's kind of what introduced feminism into my life, and just being surrounded by very strong women in my family and empowering women. They're just so strong. I think they've always just made it known that as women, we are just very strong people with ourselves, with others, in whichever situation. I just think women are very strong, and that's just always been my idea, and I think that is really why I would find myself a feminist.
I think it's really important to note that with these three responses, we've got different perspectives, and it's just really indulges into the different waves that they all embody. So that is something I want to point out. We're going to go ahead and move on to our questions.
So now, specifically for you, Vanessa, how do you feel that fourth wave feminism has impacted legislation and workplace policies regarding gender equality?
Yes. So pretty much the fourth wave feminism has built upon like challenging those gender norms, and it's definitely impacted policies and things of that nature, because like I'm gonna bring it back to my research. This is like my bread and butter, and I love it. Like back to machismo and marianismo. And through my dissertation study, I really got to get a greater sense of what gender meant to the first gen Latinos that I was interviewing, and a lot of it meant, you know, kind of identifying with certain traits that were either more feminine or more masculine, depending on the gender you were assigned. So I think that we're in a time now where we can challenge that. Like femininity doesn't have to be looked at as weak, or masculinity doesn't have to be associated with aggressiveness. And oftentimes we don't realize that it goes beyond. It goes through these gender identities of like, now it's not just your gender, but now it's like a personality that you're taking on. It's like a different behavior that you're taking on, and we don't realize that that's such ingrained, and a lot of it can come from our culture. I specifically focus on cultural values, so my perspective is gonna come from that, especially with Latinos, with family being such a big importance and such a big cultural value. We don't realize that sometimes our employment or our jobs or like what we wanna do is sometimes like as a result of what we were taught, right? Like certain domestic things are occupations and or jobs are associated with women, right? Whereas certain jobs are associated with males. So I thought that was really interesting and a big finding in my research study, which was like folks identifying with like, oh, my dad isn't as loving with me, or like, I don't really know who he is, he's never really hugged me. And like, I got to really explore that sometimes we associate even like love languages with gender. And we're in a time where like, obviously, you know, we tend to still use gender, and we're also in a space where like, gender isn't just male and female anymore, male and women, as I like to use better. It's beyond that, and I think it's a time where we need to challenge, like, we don't need to associate, like, you can be masculine and be a woman, you can be feminine and be a woman. It's a matter of what feels comfortable to you, and we shouldn't necessarily identify you based on your gender, and that shouldn't, like, I literally micromanage what you choose to do, and like, beyond your career, beyond how you act, you know, so I would say that we're in a time where we're challenging that a lot more now, so that's how I would answer it.
Absolutely. Annie, for you, what example of feminism or lack of feminism shaped your mentality of what feminist was growing up?
So, going back to my childhood, going back to El Salvador, my microsystem was all female, and it was all like very, not all, maybe my grandmother. My grandmother was that strong female, single, raising 6 kiddos, and having to fight for a place in our town. She had a store. It was a pretty decent store, and because there was no mail, we had no help. So every time my grandmother will go to the city and buy like sacks of maize, beans, whatever, I was the one that was unloading these things, and it got to a point where I felt like I had to protect my grandmother, I had to protect my mother, There was an occasion where there was a man, he was drunk, and he was with a machete, kind of like sliding into my mom and insulting her and telling her that he was gonna kill her. And my grandmother had guns, and I had keys to them. So I went and took a gun, and I brought it to this man, and I was like, mofo, keep on talking to my mom like that, you're gonna die today. So where it came to my household, I did play like a male part of me, you know, because I felt like I had to protect my family. But then in the macro system, even though it was a small community, it will still look as like a female has to do this. Like your job is to clean, your job is to cook, your job is to do this, right? So even what I used to do in the house and how I will act in the house, in the store, I was judged by it and I was criticized by it. And we didn't have TV, so Casa was la telenovela from the town. So I always had to adjust how I will act. Like I had to adjust how I will act when I will go to school and I will talk to people. And then I had to adjust when I will come home and I will be attending clients and all of that. So I think at the end, all of those experiences just helped me shape myself and adjust into whatever roles I come in. So I know if I am in a situation where I need to be strong and I need to kind of like be tough and change my voice, I'm able to do that. But when I'm working with a kid, I was like, all that gentleness, all that nurturing comes out. So that's how it was for me growing up and how I managed to balance things.
Genesis, how is modern feminism approaching fighting for women's rights compared to traditional feminism?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I was really taking a lot of time thinking about how I would answer that question. I couldn't help but to think about how when feminist groups first were established, I think it was predominantly white women, and they were fighting for predominantly white women's rights. It was not including people of color, people like us, women like us, and I think today we are seeing a lot of more involvement, more like Chicana feminism, as you mentioned. Black women are starting to make coalitions and, you know, just fighting for their rights and anything that comes with it. So thinking about that, I also, well, a fun fact, actually, apparently every single year International Women's Day has like a theme. And I found it very interesting that this year's theme is women that fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I really like that, it kind of like correlated to what we're doing today. You know, I think before there wasn't a room full of people of color, people from marginalized communities, and just speaking on women's rights. You didn't see that before. Before, it would have been white women in the crowd, white women speaking about their issues as white women, but our issues are a lot different from how theirs looks. You know, I'm not too sure exactly what was going on with them back then, but women of color are just every single day, it's just so much harder for us to go on with life, especially living in low-income communities. As you mentioned, like me to come home and be a mom and you know, going out in the street and having to show like this masculine side, and especially growing up in South Central, you can't really show your soft side, you can't do that. So I think now it's just a lot different. Women of color are becoming a lot stronger, they're becoming more empowering, and they're just sharing that. I think social media also plays a very big role. I've been seeing women's rights being like advocated for so much more, especially in the media, and now with like TikTok and so much more of a younger crowd being on social media, I think it's targeting the younger crowd too, and I think that's a really good thing. So I am very proud of feminism today.
Vanessa, what are some key challenges that educators face in advocating for gender equality and feminism within educational institutions?
So I'm going to speak it from a perspective of higher education because that's like the spaces that I'm in. But interesting bringing up DEI, right? Like it aligns with this whole concept of feminism as well, because it's like diversity, they want it, right? They're asking for it, but it's like diversity for it to show up in the way they want it to look like, right? So the same thing goes for with feminism. So it's like, you know, I'm now in these spaces of being an educator, and I come proudly as a feminista, but I still pertain to the university, right? So there's this still where it gets challenging at times, especially now where we're living in a cancel culture, and we're living in a time where like there's still red tape around. So what I say and cannot say in class, like it could easily, I can get fired, you know, let's speak things as to how they are. So there is still a level of micromanagement to the extent of how you can advocate in higher education and amongst your classes. And now I'm getting to see a little bit of that, right? Once you're in those spaces, you kind of start to see what feels comfortable, what feels also authentic, because I know for me, authenticity is very important in wherever I chose to teach at, because I'm gonna come as I am. If you're asking me to come as Vanessa from South Central, I'm very well educated and I'm very confident in that, but I'm also me. I'm gonna come up like with my Vanessa necklace and like be who I am, you know, like I don't wanna lose that, because that's a big, it's beyond like, it's an identity for me, and it's also, it speaks to where I come from, but it also speaks to like my story and my journey, so it is personal. So I am gonna introduce myself as Doctora Castellanos, because visibility is extremely important. I see it all the time in the work that I do with my students. Most of my students are Latina students. I'm in social work, very, very popular with more women, but also Latina women. So it's important that we not only exist as Latinas in these spaces, but also that we ethnically represent the students that we're educating. So this is all, it is interesting, and it's also very complicated at the same time. So I think now I'm newer to the space of teaching, like a year in, which is like, you know, fairly new. I'm learning the ropes, and I'm learning like how much of it can I just, you know, bring forward, and how much, you know, and like at what pace, because it is kind of like a engaging type of thing. So I'm always at heart going to be me, but it is also, it is micromanaged to an extent. So that's where the challenge comes in. What else can I say in education spaces? Seeing more representation of women in leadership positions. That one is big for me, because again, DEI, both in women and centered hire, like hiring women and also for DEI purposes, like we often have students, and especially in higher education, mostly are women. If you look at the statistics, population, the demographics, it's more women. So to me, it's, why are the deans reflecting males? You know, come on now, where to me it's like, I deserve to be in those spaces, which I'm coming for those spaces, right? Because it's like, it's so, especially through the research that I do, visibility is so impactful. Like literally, mentorship happens through being visible in those spaces. So I'm seeing that firsthand now with my students. And I'm realizing that it just doesn't make sense to me anymore. Like, why is the dean of a women's college a male? And then, you know, their salaries, that's a whole other topic, right? So there's that, but there's also the unequal pay within women and males, because oftentimes that's a gate kept. That's not really shown, like how much like everyone makes across the department. So that's a whole other topic of like, hey, what do others make? Because I want to make what he's making as well. So I think we're in a time now where women are becoming more empowered, and it's through education, but also through ethnic visibility of people like you in those spaces. So yeah, that's what I would like to say for that. I could go on about this.
Thank you. Anali, what role does feminism play in shaping the parenting ways you take compared to the style you were raised in?
Still just piggybacking from what I've been saying earlier, because I was exposed to those different roles that I had to adjust to. When I had my children, and the majority of them are boys, I did make sure that they were going to be raised in a way that they were going to learn how to clean their own underwear, how to cook, and how to just look after themselves without expecting a woman to do those things for them. But at the same time, still being a person, a human that is going to be respectful to their significant other, that are going to be there to provide support and to empower their significant other to be who they want to be. without losing themselves. Like, I'm the macho, right? I'm the one that carries the pantalones around the house. Like, I make sure that they were not gonna grow up that way, and I am very proud that they are not like that. They are very supportive to their significant other. They are very, they know how to do like the more cringy little things, like open a door for them or do like little hearts for them. But at the same time, they know like if their significant other want to go for a higher position, want to go there, like yes, you should do it, like go for it. Like I'm here to support you, I'm here to cheer you on, and I'm very proud of my kids.
Yeah.
Genesis. How do you think Gen Z's experience and perspectives have contributed to the ongoing conversation about feminism?
I think Gen Z's experience I think we're very observing, and especially now I think a lot of things are becoming trends, so they're like grabbing onto them and like using them everywhere they go. So one thing that I kind of found very interesting was in my junior year of high school, a lot of girls got together, a lot of students got together, and one of the teachers, she actually like led it, she like organized it, because my school was kind of putting like restrictions on dress codes, and they weren't really like making a lot of sense. And I feel like just seeing the Gen Zs, they really organize. I think that's something that Gen Zs are doing a lot more. They're organizing, and organizing is it's very powerful. So just seeing them organize, they prepared and they planned and they hosted like a strike in the school. And I thought that was very empowering, because the girls really were like, I feel disrespected that this male teacher is telling me to cover up. Like, am I intimidating him? Am I making him feel uncomfortable? If I am, why? You know, like, is that really important? Like, is what you wear to class really important? You're there for an education. If you feel like, you know, however you decide to go to school, if that's what makes you feel comfortable and you feel like that's what, you know, just brings out who you truly are, I think that's perfectly fine. There's no reason why these male teachers, the deans, the principals, why they're making all these restrictions on like these young girls. And I thought it was very empowering. Just one of the teachers, she like posted it. She saw what was going on, saw that it wasn't right. They were basically, these girls were being basically sexualized. And they organized, they came out and they spoke, and I think that I genuinely saw that what they did made change. So I think the organizing really helped. And with Gen Z, I think we're like very unapologetic on like everything that we do. Mostly everything that's done is intentional. I think we're becoming a lot more aggressive too. Like give me what I want, and I'm not gonna stop until I get that. And I like it. I'm here for it. I love it. So yeah.
I love that.
Thank you. Vanessa, in what ways did the overturn of Roe v. Wade affect the movement of feminism?
Yeah, so the overturn of it, what happened was it gave states more of that liberty to kind of like, they're like, oh, we're gonna assess what the population wants. Bullshit. They're not doing that. They're not going based on the state's needs. They're going based on control and power. And we're not new to systems of oppression, patriarchy, and white supremacy. This is not anything new, right? We know that control happens in this way. So since 2010, which is, you've been the fourth way the feminism started, there's been a big movement towards taking more control of like the legislators, right? So what's going on right now is there's a lot of bills getting passed, a lot. And we don't realize they are impactful because you have people in states like Georgia and Texas, like very, very conservative states, where they're passing laws that are very like 6 weeks, you cannot have an abortion past 6 weeks. Whereas prior to that, it was 32, I don't have like 23 to 30. That's a big difference. That's a big gap. So what it's doing is, it's not because they care. That's not what it is about. It's to take back control, to have it more, because Democrats had more of that control. So Republicans, because it's more conservative leaning to be anti-abortion, they're taking back control, and they've been doing this strategically. And how they're doing it is by getting together with like local groups, whether they're like national groups, local groups, and they're putting together these bills and they're getting passed. Like in states like Arizona, states like Georgia just passed. There's more than 20 states that are already making it that way, where like you can't get an abortion past 6 weeks. And they're using very captivating stories. That's what I'll say. So what they're doing is they're using stories like, for example, in Arizona, it was like, we're passing this law because more girls are getting aborted, right? They'll use stories like that, or, that to get people's attention. They were like, oh, we don't want the abortion of women. Like they use something like that to kind of get a law passed, because we all know that it's hard to understand these legislations sometimes. As voters, like the language is tricky, especially like your level of education. Our family members like oftentimes don't really understand what they're voting for as well, right? So that is happening through this language, and through their they're getting together with other like national, local organizations, and they're pretty much passing their agenda, but it's not because of necessarily importance. It's more to take control, Republican control, and more conservative control. But what that does for people in states like Texas and Georgia is that they're struggling even with getting access to care. For example, if you have a miscarriage, specifically in Texas, there was an incident where someone was having a miscarriage, but they were denied at that hospital. They had had a miscarriage prior to a service, because now what's going on in these conservative states is that the providers, doctors, hospitals, because of liability purposes and the laws are changing, they no longer want to do any types of procedures related to that. So if folks were not aware, the procedures for abortion and miscarriages, some of them are similar in the sense of like, again, not the same, they can have very similarly. So certain hospitals, because of that, there's fear of doing these procedures. So a woman in Texas was told, go home and the bleeding is not severe enough. So the woman's husband was like, well, what if I go and like, how, like she's bleeding out, like I can lose my wife. But they didn't want to do the procedure because they didn't want to get sued. They're looking at it from liability now. And if a state has no abort because of the procedure being very similar to that, so it's hard to kind of tell whether it was more of abortion than a miscarriage. So that's denying someone access to healthcare, right? So it's becoming a lot, that overturn of it is making it a lot more difficult to access in a lot of states. And it's been over 20 states now that there's a lot, like the laws are just like before our eyes are changing, and that is where it's very critical, because the access, where people are not having access to their basic rights. Mm-hmm.
And how do you, as a mother, balance the pursuit of your own goals and ambitions with the responsibilities of motherhood while embracing feminist principles?
So I try my best to just be mind focused to where I want to go and how I'm going to get there. And I think it was like 13 years old when self-care became a thing to me. And it's a priority, even before being a mom. Like self-care is a priority for me, and I know that in order for me to show up as my best self in anywhere that I'm going to be, I need to come with my cup full. That is going to allow me to be a better mom, that is going to allow me to be a better recruiter, that is going to allow me to be a better teacher, work with the mamas that I'm currently working with. So that has been priority, and I learned that very young. So now when I do see videos of women like, oh, they're doing like a bath with rose petals, I'm like, I'm doing that for the longest. But that's how I do it, because I do have a lot on my plate, and I know that if I don't give myself that time, I'm just gonna fail all over the place, and I can't fail from being a mom. Excuse me. have to be there 24/7 for them, especially I have a 2-year-old that requires a lot of attention. And then I am working with different mamas at the also who are currently pregnant. So to me, it's important to show up with my authentic self, being the best that I could be, to be able to just help them and help everybody that I'm working with. So yeah, I do put myself first to come and serve everybody else as best as I can.
Thank you. And Genesis, what impact does feminism have on the career aspirations and choices that you are currently pursuing?
Yeah, so I aspire to be a lawyer. I'm still not sure what type of lawyer I would like to be, but being involved, because I have been involving myself, I work at a law firm, and I think just the whole sector of law is really dominated by men, and a lot of the people that hold, like, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people that hold the power is men. So what I was noticing the other day was, wow, like a lot of my mentors are men, but I started feeling like they will never understand how difficult it is for me to be in the shoes that they are in now. And I think that's kind of why it's been a little difficult for me to really understand if like that's the career I want to pursue, because I'm starting to see how like corrupt it is too, and it's just like, I don't really know if I want to be part of that. So I think where feminism comes in place there is where I'm starting to realize I don't want to be inspired by men. I want to be inspired by the women doing this. So I've been leaning more towards that. Well, like what you do is fine, but I want to see what you're doing in a woman. So like I'll start looking. I've been starting to look for more like women mentors and women of color, especially. I think that's kind of like how I will get a better head start, because if I try to follow the same steps that these men, especially if they're white men, like it's just going to be a lot harder for me, and I will be putting myself in a situation where in a way it's kind of unrealistic. And yeah, I think feminism really just shows in like the aspirations, because ideally I don't want to surround myself or put myself in a situation where I feel like I'm being deprived of an opportunity just by being a woman, just by being a woman of color, by being young, especially if you're a young person in a setting full of elder people, especially elder men, especially elder white men. Yeah, it's just gonna be so much difficult. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Thanks so much. So now we want to go ahead and open up the questions to the audience. If you have any questions for our lovely panelists here.
I have a question for Vanessa. I know you're a professor at Castellanos. What was one of the hardest challenges that you had to overcome as a female, going into the field, being a teacher, getting used to it all?
I like that question. I really do. So Dominguez, this is my first semester there, so it is still fairly new. So I'm adjusting. I'm loving it. So the Cal State energy is so like the space for me. It feels, but something that I experienced specifically there, and it's not to speak on the institution. This is one thing that happened, but I've been noticing not just there, but like actually in several spaces, people's reaction to me being a professor has been interesting. I felt microaggressions a bit because of like how it was, because I'm aware of what they are, where I'm like, I know that just wasn't me, that felt off. I know it felt off. An example was like my first day, again, I show up as me, like young, I can resonate with that, being young, and they're not looking like maybe the traditional professor. So I walk in, and even the students are like, oh, we thought you were a student. I always get that, like I was being recruited by a sorority, even though I'm already in one. I walk down and they're like, hey, come, and I'm like, So I get the age thing, but specifically, I would say a challenge or something that I've noted was a professor that was there prior to me she was like talking to, I had another employee come and help me set up that first day, and he was like, no, she's a professor, and she was like, oh, you're the professor? It's like, I got in that energy, I'm not gonna lie. Even at this space, you would think that I wouldn't have to be dealing with that. Again, I'm showing in confident, I know I belong there, but I get a lot of that type of, those comments but they're usually like, first that, then followed by a very nice comment. And those are microaggressions. And I'm very well aware because this is my study of, it looks like my interest, so it's like, it was kind of like, oh, you're the professor? So it's that energy. Another time, with that same person, it was just like, I introduced myself again because she had been like overextending. It was like time for me to start preparing for my class, and she was ending class very late, so I was kind of like trying to make my face known. So I introduced myself again, like, hey, and then she was just like, oh, I forgot her name, and then I was like, oh, I'm Professor Castellanos, because I have students already, and like that's what I am. She was just like, oh, if you're doing all of that, then I'm professor, like, and my students were there and they witnessed that. And I was like, it made you, when you feel like you're questioning something, that's something that's off. Because I was like, I'm just saying I'm a professor, like, because that's what I am, but it was just like her energy. And then after it was like, oh, have a good class. So I was like, I see you. I see you. And I know I recognize that. I see it all the time. Mountain Marys, I'll see it too. I'm not your traditional professor. I'm very different. I'm very vocal. I'm very active. I'm gonna be at the events. I'm gonna tell you what I think, and I'm seeing a little bit of like people's reaction. And it's not always like, the reaction you may want, but that's not gonna change like how I am. But I am definitely seeing that, and I didn't think I'd experienced that, but I am. It's usually like that, like people surprised. Like, you? Yes, me. How many more times can I say me? So I am noticing for sure a lot of that. Even from like I'm seeing a lot more now. Even like I went to the doctor. Like this is I'm sharing this because I had like the doctor mentioned like, oh, when are you coming back? And I'm like, oh, I have to look at the calendar. Clearly in my mind didn't have a date. She's like, aren't you the PG? And I was like, wait, what was that for? Again, another microaggression. That because I'm literally like a PhD student or a candidate, like that doesn't mean I know everything, but those remarks are the ones that we need to like literally like, they're not just, they're set for a reason, and those are like things that we need to kind of like challenge, it's like, or again, the same person was like, I was wearing UCLA, I went there for undergrad, oh, what sport did you play? Another microaggression. I don't know what it is, but I don't know if it's more, I'm more like in those spaces, but I'm noticing it a lot more. A lot. It's happening a lot. So yes, it's just always a surprise that I'm the professor. I'm like, yes, me.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
And to anyone who wants to answer it, who in your life was your first mentor in real life, not like an author or a person you've never met, and why?
I feel like I'm already ready to talk, but I don't want to move.
I think for me, it was my grandmother. Yeah, it was her. She was stolen, because that was a term used in El Salvador, se la robaron, at 13. And by 16, she had 4 babies, and then the love of her life, my grandfather, was murdered, and all because money. And so at 16, 17, by that time, she was a widow and with 4 kids, and with a little, you could say like a little mine of gold, and is what everybody else went for. And because she was young and she was a woman, the other siblings of my grandfather thought that they could just go and take it away from her, and that she was then going to fight back. little did they know that that little old woman with just a third grade education had long claws. So yeah, it was her. She was my first role model and my ancestor now.
I think this one was very, very hard for me, but I think it would be one of my teachers. I would say it was my 8th grade teachers. I actually didn't know the word mentor until I got into high school, so it's like really hard for me to like think about this. But my 8th grade teacher, I remember she said a quote. I don't remember by who it was, but she said, "Whatever you believe, you can achieve." And I know the quote is so simple, but when you just hear it, but it's really not. Because when you think about it, it's true. Like, if you really believe it, you can achieve it. And when she told me that, I just took that, to this day, I take that everywhere with me. And I genuinely feel like whatever I believe, I will achieve, because I've seen it happening. So, yeah, I mean, it's not as nice of a story as but yeah, I would say it was her. Yeah.
Okay, so I answered too. So when I think of like that person, that first mentor was definitely my sister. So my sister is 12 years older than me, and she actually was the first of a family of 5 to go to college. So she actually went to Dominguez Hills. So this is a very full circle moment for me being at Dominguez Hills. So I'll never forget these moments. I was like 8, 9. She would take me to college with her. She'd be, "Hey, wait in the car, I'm gonna do my midterm. I'm gonna come right back." I'm literally 25 years later, a professor in the same department and classes that my sister was taking. And I'm just like, that right there was like, you know, because our sacrifices are not just ours, they're our families, they're our communities. So for me, that was a big full circle moment. So mentorship is not something that something very important to me, because I've had several mentors, my sister being the first one, who has been able to meet me to the capacity she's been able to meet me at, you know. And like throughout my different like seasons of life, I've had to seek different mentorship, from whether it's like my career, my professional, you know, like professionalism, different like realms. And I say that now, I don't take it so lightly, because I realize how big of a deal mentorship is, especially like, again, the visibility, like, and actually knowing that person. I realize that, again, through my research, but also through my personal experience, that when it's a mentor that's tangible, when it's someone that you can call, someone that you know that is that person, it makes it more empowering, it makes it more effective, because you know that person. This is not a celebrity on TV, this is not someone theoretical, this is someone that you know, that is, this is an example, doctora, that is, so then it gives you that ability of like, I can do it, because I know someone and I've seen it done, you know. So like, I attended like, so for your PhD, you have to do a defense, right? I'm not embarrassed to say I didn't know what a PhD was until I went to college. You know, a lot of us don't really understand what different careers are until we're exposed to them. So I had a colleague do her defense, and I attended just last year. I attended my first one, and I'm like, you know what? I got very emotional that day, because I'm like, this journey is pretty complex, and like to see you do that, I know I can. I just saw you do it, so I know how to do it, because. And I said that they were like, I was like such in my emotions that day, and I was just like, because of you, I know what a defense looks like now, and that to me is like speaks volumes. When it's someone that you know, when it's someone you can call, when it's someone you can identify with, because I see that in my analysis now that I'm looking at like all my studies that I've done with my for my dissertation, but also in my experience, both personally that I've gone through, but also how my students are reacting to me. I'm seeing it firsthand on how much mentorship is so critical to people's journeys. Whether that is, and when I say journey, I know I talk about it from an education standpoint, but I'm realizing that like me being there at Dominguez, I'm not only mentoring on their curriculum and education, I'm getting asked questions about their professionalism, their home life, like, and you don't realize that like we all need support in those other areas, and it's okay to say that. And a lot of us are first gen, navigating these spaces for the first time. Let's talk about confidence, let's talk about self-esteem, let's talk about family, let's talk about the challenges as well as the goodness in it, you know. So that's how I teach. Like I'm very open with my students, and like that's what I love to foster, that energy of authenticity and openness, because I recognize that at the end of the day, they're not just students. Like, they're parents, they're working 2 jobs, they're caring for their abuelas, going to appointments, and like, I know that struggle because I lived it and I see it in my research, and like, we all can attest to that. So I welcome my students in that manner of like, I know you're more than, so I have empathy and compassion for them that maybe others that haven't gone through it, like just to speaking to your point, they're not gonna understand. And even though we're all Latinas here, all of our experience is different. It's not to say we are very diverse in our population, so we are going to experience things very, very different. Generationally, based on your income, based on like where you're from, how you talk, how you dress. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, any other question?
Yeah, I know you talk a lot about taking up space, especially in like the higher education space. And I know a lot of like corporations and institutions want to hire people because of they want to increase diversity or hire more women. Do you guys ever feel like they're using that as like tokenism, or to be a token, just be like, oh, we have more women, so it's just kind of to brag that they have more diversity in those institutions or spaces? Do you guys ever feel like that at all as women, or like, you know, Latinas?
Yeah.
I definitely think that, I know not just myself, others have felt like, just like affirmative action and things of that knowledge of like, of hiring based because that tokenism, people do feel it. And I think, I don't necessarily say I feel that, I think that I've worked so hard to be where I'm at, that I'm like, no, I belong here, I have the expertise, so I think, but I will say that came with gaining more confidence in myself and becoming more self-aware. So this is not just a one journey, this is a holistic movement. You know, this is like you growing as a person as well as professionally. So I would say that because I know myself in a different capacity now, I don't feel like a token because I know I equally belong there, I'm equally as badass as them. Or even actually better, because guess what? We have the older faculty coming to me and asking me like, how do you relate to your students? Because they're seeing me like really connect with my students in a like where they can't. So you're starting to see that they actually need us. They need us. Exactly. You know, so I know that now. I see it literally firsthand, so I don't necessarily feel, I think I see myself as an asset. It's like, so now that I'm looking at full-time positions, I'm like, no, you want me here.
Yeah.
So
You need me.
exactly. So and that's part of the empowerment part. And I connected a lot to confidence and self-esteem because again I study this back to gender. I study this a lot, and I see that in my students as well. I oftentimes get questions from white faculty like, hey, I noticed, and they'll come to the Latina, of course.
Right.
You know, my Latina students, in order to feel comfortable to talk, I have to tell them good. Like, they need to hear through like words of affirmation to know they're doing good. And I can relate to that because, and I tell them, well, you know what? Some of these students don't hear that at home. Not to speak on people's parenting. Our parents are able to meet us where they can. That's another conversation for another panel. But it speaks to the point of like, maybe we do need a little bit more of like words of affirmation, right? Because we don't get that. We may not be, I'm telling you, you have students coming here who have never heard that. So when I give feedback to my students, it's always positive, then followed by the recommended, because you don't understand how important and critical language is to how people receive it, and how now that I told you that, good job, and like I'm highlighting their strengths. I always teach from a strength-based perspective. Guess what? They do believe in themselves. I'm like, dang, Miss told me, literally, you call me, hey Miss, you know, from there. I love it. And then they're like, she told me that, so guess what? They are gonna believe in me. They are gonna believe in themselves, you know?
Yeah.
So that is like key for me, for sure.
I just want to say thank you, first of all, for all of you for sharing. My question is to Anali, but to anyone else who wants to answer as well. You were talking about community and you were talking about ancestors in terms of being mentors, correct? And so the question is, how has ancestral practices or your understanding of your ancestry been present in your practice of feminism and how and your identity today? And that's open for anybody, I guess.
So 2015, it was when shit hit the fan. And that took me to just a kind of like a self-study of myself. And I learned at that time that a lot of that connection that we have with our ancestors through our bloodline, especially women, right? Because we do carry like our great-grandmother cells, our grandmother cells, and we have like a little bit of them. So I know my grandmother went through a lot, and it never clicked to me how much of what I went through was very similar to what she went through. And even my mother, and even like the experiences that they each had, how I was like a pattern of those experiences as well. So when I understood that, at that time my grandmother was still alive, and what you said, they did what they could, right, with what they had available to them. It was when I was finally able to forgive myself for the things that I made, and also forgive them for what I thought, the things that they did that impacted my own life. And even as a little girl, and at that time I didn't even know the word ancestor or what it meant, but as a little girl, when I first saw the picture of my great grandmother, I always felt the connection with her. And I always felt like she was taking care of me and that she was looking over me. And it was not until years later that now that I understand that ancestor communication that I have with them, and how they still are present in my life, and how they still come to me. And like now that my grandmother passed away 2 years ago, like I feel her presence, and I know she's guiding me, and I know she's taking care of me, and I feel her strength moving through me. So that has helped me be more at peace with who I am, and accept myself as I am, and embrace who I am.
I guess another part of it, if I may, it's just what are ancestral practices you think that our creators had that we should be reincorporating into our practices of femininity or feminism today?
Earlier I mentioned about postpartum,
Oh, yeah.
and I think that's a big one that we really need to embrace and learn to really take care of our bodies and take care of ourselves. Because how things were put on the table to us, it was almost like you have a baby and you have to go to work the next day, and you don't honor your body, you don't honor what you just went through. And now the mentality, because I see it with these young girls, is it didn't hurt, like I'm fine, like I could go do this, right? But your body went through a big change during that time, during those 9 months. Honor that. Any experience, honor it, honor yourself, honor your body, make that connection with your womb, make that connection with your heart, like, and do a call to your spirit guides, do a call to your ancestors, because it's difficult to explain for me, but when you call to them, they are there, and you feel the presence, like, I'm feeling it right now. Like you just feel it, like you feel the love, you feel the strength, but I think you will only achieve that when you are in alignment with your own self, and that is not easy to do. That is a little bit of work that you have to put, and that's where the yoga comes in for me, right? That's why I decided to do that, because that really helped me. Like, it has helped me through healing, many experiences, past experiences, and to make those connections stronger with my ancestors.
So I feel like we're at a place right now where people are realizing that we don't want just representation, we want quality representation. And so I'm curious, what does that quality representation look like for all of you? And then in tangent with that question is also the idea of like, what do you think feminism needs? Like, where do you want it to go? Where would you like it to go from, the fourth wave that we're in right now?
Really good.
I'm like,
Hey,
I'll answer the first one because that's the one, you have to repeat the second one for me. So the first one was kind of like quality versus like, right? The quality
Yeah,
of it.
like,
Yeah.
you can see a Latina anywhere, but
Yeah.
like what she's spewing might not be things that actually uplift, Latinas and whatnot. So I'm thinking, what does that quality look like for you? When do you know, like,
I think it takes time to get to know people's like agendas and motives, but everyone's always coming from a different perspective based on their personal experiences. And as much as you may, we all judge, right? We all do it. It's okay to say we do it, but like maybe you're perceiving it. I'm just not personal. I'm saying we can perceive something, but maybe they're meeting you as much as they can to the feminine. They may in their mind thinking that's feminism in their definition of it, right? But that's as much as they know it. So I think that's something that I've become aware in my journey, that like everyone's on different levels, not levels, I would say in steps in their journey. So it's so how I do it specifically, like in workspaces, I would talk more about it from that sense of like, because I'm seeing it written in a lot of mission statements that we welcome this, right? We often see it. Everyone wanted to have a mission statement that said they're about diversity, right? So to me, it's like, okay. I don't know if it's the research side of me. I don't believe a lot of things that are read anymore. I'm like, where's this coming from? Everything is biased to an extent, right? And people have their perspectives and agendas. So I'm like, who's funding this, first off? So now I look into where is this coming from, because that's going to tell you what you need to know. So depending on, because it could be from South, it not be about the people. It depends on, so I look at patterns. So I'm like, okay, I'll look at what they're a part of, because there's a lot of things that are contradictory, right? So we have people that are shopping on Amazon, but they're upset at, like this. So it's like, which, let's keep it 100. It's what it is. So I just think people are picking and choosing their fight, and so stick to, you don't have to be about everything, but be about what you're about. And I think that's what I've learned. Like, I can't have but what I'm about, I am about, and I know it well. But how I kind of discern that is like seeing them, okay, I'll see your mission statement. Okay, do I like resonate with it? But then it's like, I see action. So what follows that? So if you're saying you're about diversity, how's your programming looking like? Like, are you having actually diversity events? And by diversity, it's not just ethnic. There's people with disabilities. I have so many types of students now that I'm seeing, like, I'm even being challenged and being like, I'm literally learning how to work with different types of students as well that are maybe that I hadn't worked with or from different communities that they're not like mine, right? So I look at kind of the programming that follows again, specifically in those workspaces. I'm like, okay, then I see if it's bullshit or not. That's how I kind of discern. So I look at like, not only what you're saying, but it's like, is your action aligning with what you're saying? That's gonna be telling, and that takes time to see from people. So I think you can definitely judge. I don't go based on the words a lot of times, but they could sound really nice. People talk really nicely, but once you look at the what follows, that is everything I need to know. So when you observe it and you're seeing it, you're gonna see it. It just takes time. So I would say that, just kind of seeing things through and seeing if they are about what they say they're about. That's the first part. I forgot the second one.
Second part was really just about like, where would you like to see feminism go? Like, what new intersections, like where, like I think for me personally, like I think even like within that book, like what's the radical potential of feminism? What can be learned from it and applied to like different intersections in communism and like these other sort of frameworks that could be used. So where would you like to see, I guess, the framework of feminism go? Big question.
And that really, ties into kind of like our closing question, which is like, what is like advice and what would give the younger generation of feminism, right? Like, what is something you guys want to see?
I know I want to see women be a lot more unapologetic. I'm like so tired of women like apologizing for stuff they don't have to. But I feel like especially us as women, we just always, I wouldn't just say everyone, but I think sometimes naturally or unnaturally, we kind of have like that side that in a way not really that we want to be pleasing, but we think we have to be pleasing to put ourselves in like a upper position. So I feel like for me, and hopefully I have a lot more time ahead of me, I know that I for sure want to be unapologetic in everything that I do, and I don't want to put myself in a situation where I feel like, oh, okay, well I need to please this person in order to get this position or in order to fit good in this situation. I do not want to see that anymore. I want women to be unapologetic, and if this person just does not benefit you, find someone else. Just like that. If people think you're too much, tell them to find less. That's the anyone else?
I would say like just continue to embrace that authentic self, and like in the aspect of like professionalism, because that's where like really my focus is right now, and I'm really experiencing that firsthand. It was a transition for me. It's like how much is this professional or not, like questioning the professionalism, but I want to bring it back to I like to challenge that, because it's like you're asking me to bring my authentic self and my diversity, so it's going to come with my cultural values as well. So I would say embracing your authenticity and not questioning whether something is professional or not, because ultimately professionalism is coming from white supremacy. So it's like, to what standard? So that's why now I'm like, because something, again, I'm also about vulnerability. It's okay to question these things. We're humans, we're experiencing some of these things for the first time, and it's like for my students will do like, oh, you know, we're talking about nail color, like different things, and they'll ask me questions and say, do you think that's professional? So I like to chat. I'm like, well, who says what's professional or not, right? I think there's obviously like I would say like it depends on where you know the space is, but really bringing that and not having, oftentimes we're so used to like code switching, and it's exhausting. It is so exhausting. And so being able to be your authentic self, it's like you can take that weight off and be able to just be more free. So I would say to continue to show up as you are, especially in those spaces where like you're overthinking it. Yeah. And continue to advocate for yourself. A lot of women, like especially with like pay, it's okay to say, you know what, I deserve more. You know, a lot of men are doing that, especially white men. And they're getting the money that they're asking for. So I think a lot of times we're not used to like, asking for money. Hey, you know, why did you choose this salary? Like, why not like the highest range? You know, it's okay to like put in, you know, how. And then again, you would ask for support on how to do that. There's a way to go about writing a letter to talk about, you know, your wage, or ask for a raise and things like that. But I think just talking more about it. And it's okay to also say, how do you do it? I think, especially like Latinas, we often mask this like, or we have forced to feel like very strong, or like that show strength. And like, I think we're in a time where like it's okay to like be a little more vulnerable, and it's okay to say, you know what, I don't got it figured out. You know, I think it's oftentimes we're existing in a space where it's very competitive. And I'm okay to speak on these things. I think that's gonna be very competitive with one another, and I see that a lot because we're used to being the only ones. So then when we have other Latinas in the same space, it becomes a little bit of like that, the cattiness, and that's a whole other topic, because I'm seeing that a lot now too. But I think empowerment is being able to be in a room with a lot of women that look like you, and it not being like a judging. It's it being like there's room for all of us here, you know, like. And kind of, I think we need to step, where would I see this going? That's where I would see this going, is that mean girl culture, kind of like leaving that behind, where it feels very competitive, or like, well, there can be two of us. That, because, and women also sexualize each other, like who looks better, and like, in the women the same way. So it's like, I think it's important for women to also keep ourselves accountable. I'm not saying we're the blame to things, but there's some accountability that I think we can take on ourselves for certain that behavior, specifically for that behavior. But again, that comes with people's self-awareness, and we all know that sometimes you can mirror what you feel internally, which is oftentimes what happens, right? Project, I mean.
It's funny you said that, because that was my advice. Like, stop judging each other, embrace each other. You know, if your neighbor decides that they don't want to have a family and that they want to just focus on their career, like, let's cheer them up and let's let them guide the path so they can get there. If they decide, you know what, I want to stay home and raise a family, cheer them up and offer help from time to time, because believe me, they're gonna be tired, they're gonna need it. So I think for me is that, like, we need to come together more and embrace each other more and support each other more, because there is a lot of us for us not to have this world in our hand. Like, it is a lot of us, and if we were to work together, come together, and put that cattiness out, we will be in a much better place.
That is it for our panel. Thank you so much. As we are getting closer to the end, I do want to go ahead and once again thank Gabe for Midnight Books for allowing us this space. I do want to invite our president of LCLA, Ingrid, to come up. She does want to say a couple of words before we end.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate you all for being here. My name is Ingrid Rivera Guzman. I have the honor of serving as the president of the board of directors of the Latino Coalition of Los Angeles. And I just want to say thank you to Olga and Katie, our Mujeronas co-chairs for our Women's Empowerment Committee, for putting this incredible panel together. So please, a big hand for our co-chairs. I'm very proud of the fact that the majority of our leadership right now and all of our committee co-chairs are women. So putting that into action, right? We at LCLA are a 501c4 nonprofit social welfare organization. We focus on empowering BIPOC communities across greater Los Angeles with the tools that they need to achieve social justice and equity. And the ways that we do that are through civic engagement, coalition building, and advocacy. So this is something that we really want to be the bridge between community and government, and make sure that our voices are being heard and that we're being represented, because we have elected officials that are there to serve us. Unfortunately, a lot of times they forget that they are public servants. But tonight I would be remiss if we didn't take a moment of silence. Earlier in February, there was a report that came out from the UN. I'm sure we are all aware of the situation that's going on in Gaza. And in mid-February, there was a report that came out showing the astounding atrocities against Palestinian girls and women for sexual assault, sexual harassment, and sexual violence. And we're also hearing accounts of the atrocities against the women who have been taken captive, right? So it's just really sad and heartbreaking that sexual violence is continued to be used as the #1 weapon to oppress and subjugate communities. And I know that this is not an isolated incident. This happened to my ancestors when Mayans and indigenous folks were raped and sexually assaulted and abused by colonizers, right? And we're seeing that happen. And so I just wanted to take a moment tonight for us to radiate love, to really hold that space and send our unconditional love, our strength and healing energy to all of the women, regardless of their ethnicity or nationality, but just hold that space for them. And I trust that that frequency, that love that we're gonna send to them is going to reverberate and is going to reach them. So if you could all just accompany me in a moment of silence for all of the women that are experiencing sexual violence. Thank you. And just as you head out tonight, I did prepare some candles. They're pink, so radiate self-love for yourself. That again, that vibration will regurgitate They've been blessed with sage and frankincense, so please grab one on your way out. Light it when you get to your home, to wherever you're going. Set an intention of peace and unconditional love, and light it. And I'll just say, once you light it, let it burn. Or if you have to turn it off, don't blow it out, stuff it out. But thank you all again for coming. We at LCLA will have our general membership the fourth Thursday of every month. We also have our committees, like I mentioned, our Women's Empowerment Committee. We have a Public Policy and Advocacy Committee. We have our Youth Development Committee. We also have an endorsement committee because we are a political organization. We do make endorsements. There is a general election coming up. We just had the primaries. So thank you all so much for coming, and please help yourself to more refreshments.